for the Packers. Joining us right now, a real filmsman, does a tremendous job for the Inquirer, and you should experience the new look of Inquirer Sports, where fans can read, watch, and listen to their favorite reporters and columnists. Go to InquirerSports.com/sports. Mr. E.J. Smith on the Comcast Business Hotline. How you doing today, E.J.?
No, well, Tyron, you got my dad calling me a filmsman now. I don't know
you are.
He means it as a compliment, but I think it might be catching on, at least in my household.
That's good, because you are a filmsman, and I'll trust you right away. Was there anything so concerning about the Eagles' offense, I'll start on that side of the ball, that would make you be discouraged that they couldn't fix it for next week regardless of the opponent?
Yeah, I think that's the biggest question that remains about this team, and I think it's fair to have questions about it, to have some skepticism. I think, it kind of depends on how you want to look at it. Like, they have the talent on the outside. They have the talent on the perimeter to be able to take advantage of those matchups, and we have seen them, do that at times this season. We saw the Steelers game. There have been times during the year where they've been able to put it together. I think at this point it's a week-to-week thing. I think there are certain matchups that they're able to take advantage of. I think there are certain defenses that, I don't want to call it an oversimplistic approach to the passing game, because I think that's maybe a little reductive and maybe not quite exactly what's happening here. But I do think in general, like there isn't always as much direction as you maybe would want from the passing game. And I think against some defenses, they can get away with it because they are so talented. Against, I think Green Bay actually played pretty well and, it seemed like they had a good plan for the Eagles passing game. And I think in general, there are going to be weeks like that with this passing game too. I think, we've had enough of a sample size that we kind of know what to expect from the group. And honestly, what to expect from them is a little bit of the unexpected.
All right, you look at the game yesterday. I mean, it was easy to look at and say the defense played pretty well in this game. But how about Nolan Smith? I mean, this guy looks like he's taking an extra step every single week. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's crazy to think about the fact, like, this is a guy that played the last preseason game. He was somebody who kind of had to prove it, coming out of training camp just to earn a spot in the rotation. And to think now, like, he was a difference maker yesterday, I mean that as like a very high compliment. Being an impact player in a playoff game like that, it's not a given. Even for first-round picks, you don't expect that, necessarily that quickly in their career. So, it really is. It stands out how he's been able to kind of put together rush moves more effectively, kind of take advantage of his athleticism. And he's an interesting player because he has a blend of, like, obviously he's a little bit of an undersized edge rusher who can, kind of relies on quickness around the edge, but he also can, because he plays with so much toughness and so much physicality, he can kind of overcome the fact that he's undersized against a lot of guys. So, he kind of has a really good combination in that. He's just basically, he's really hard-nosed against the run, so he kind of plays, like, I'd say he plays above his weight class a little bit against the run, and then he can still use his quickness. I mean, that first sack he had, that was just a really good inside move. He beat him to the spot. So, yeah, I mean, I remember when Brandon Graham got injured, we all were wondering what this edge rusher group would look like without him, and I think Nolan Smith has done, a really remarkable job filling in that spot to the point. Obviously, they still miss Brandon Graham in a lot of ways, but I do think he has, filled that role in a way that I wouldn't have expected him to, a couple months ago.
Also looking at the defense, EJ, when we had you on last week, you mentioned that this is a tough draw, this particular Packers team, and how they're talented, yet there were times where the Eagles made them look completely inept. While we've been focused on maybe some of the things the Eagles did poorly, the Packers really, really struggled. Should we take some extra, confidence from the Eagles' defense or offense that they were able to make the Packers seem so inept at times?
Yeah, obviously the Packers had some injuries in that game. That might have changed what they could do offensively. But I do think, Jordan Love is a talented quarterback. Obviously he didn't have his best game against the Eagles yesterday. But I think that that's a lot of credit to the Eagles' defense. I mean, that was the lowest points total the Packers had all year. And again, I think that what stood out to me is how, so many guys in the Eagles locker room talked about how much comfortability they have and how they've earned Vic Fangio's trust within the scheme that they're in. They're confident that Fangio's going to get them in the right call in the right situation, and they're at a point now where they're past the introductory level of Fangio's scheme. Zach Vaughn talked about how in week one he would not have been allowed to kind of deviate from his assignment, to get that interception that he got against Jordan Love yesterday. So, I thought that was really interesting, kind of like how this defense has grown within the scheme and how Vic Fangio has sort of entrusted them to, since they do understand the scheme well enough, kind of, I don't want to call it improvise because I think they're still doing their jobs, but, again, like kind of stretch their responsibilities within the framework of the system. And, it's allowing them to make plays. I think that being opportunistic is the most important thing you can be as a defense in the playoffs. Being able to force turnovers, being able to, have explosive plays like sacks, draw holding penalties. And they've been able to do it, not only because of the talent that they have, but also because of the system that they are so clearly thriving in at this point.
Yeah, talk about opportunistic. Oren Burks had a big play on the opening kickoff, number one, but then has big shoes to fill going forward. Your thoughts?
Yeah, it's interesting. He had a similar situation with the 49ers last year. Obviously, he kind of got called into action in the Super Bowl there too. So I think he's kind of somewhere in between like a quality starter at linebacker and a special teams ace. I think they can get by without him, but I also think, that's a huge loss. Nakobe Dean is definitely a huge loss. He's been huge right next to Zach Bond. I mean, Zach Bond gets a lot of the accolades, but I think that partnership, is really important. And even Zach Bond mentioned that Nakobe Dean still kind of gives him guidance at times because Nakobe Dean's obviously played off-ball linebacker longer than Zach Bond. So I think it's a big loss. Obviously, Oren Burks had the big, like you mentioned, the big play to kind of set the tone for the entire evening. I think the Eagles hope it sets the tone for the entire postseason. He's a physical player. I think he can be opportunistic, like you said, but I think that it is going to be a big loss, especially in coverage, and as a blitzer, you've seen Nakobe Dean really be able to impact the pass game. Obviously, he's also been doing really well against the run. So it's a big loss. I don't think there's any way around that, but I do think that Oren Burks flashed an ability to make some splash plays here and there.
EJ, before we let you go, looking forward, you're a filmsman, you've looked at all these teams. Who do you think would be the better matchup for next week? Would it be better to face the Rams, who they've already seen, or the Vikings, where the quarterback down the stretch really struggled?
Yeah, I think I like the Eagles in both of these matchups, honestly. I actually think that the wild card matchup had me a little bit more nervous. I can hear – well, and to answer your question, I think the Rams are the more favorable matchup for the Eagles. The Rams kind of struggled offensively down the stretch of the regular season, and obviously, the Eagles already have a road win against them under their belt. So I think you can feel pretty confident going into that matchup that Saquon Barkley's going to be able to have a day, maybe not a historic day like you had in the first matchup, but he should be able to run against that defense. And again, that offense hasn't looked as good as even it did when the Eagles played them, a couple weeks or probably a couple months ago. And in terms of the Vikings, I feel like the Packers may be matched up a little bit worse for the Eagles, and I feel good about the Eagles defense against that Vikings offense. The only thing that gives me a little bit of pause with the Vikings, and the reason why I'd prefer, why if I were the Eagles, I would prefer to see them play the Rams, is because I do think that matchup against Brian Flores would make me a little nervous against Jalen Hurts. He struggled. Hurts did against pressure looks yesterday. He struggled a little bit. When the Packers sent extra rushers, I think that stretch through the second and third quarter, that was kind of brought on by the fact the Packers said, we're just going to start blitzing this guy and try to heat him up because their defensive line really wasn't generating a lot of pressure. Brian Flores is one of the most blitz-heavy defensive coordinators in the NFL. He has exotic pressure packages, and he does it without having, he does it while still keeping two safeties over the top. So I think that he would have a good plan against this Eagles offense, something that would give him a lot of trouble, which is why, I think that the Rams are probably the more favorable matchup. But even with that said, I think the Eagles should be favored in either of those, if either of those teams are coming to the link.
Well, appreciate it, EJ. We love your work. A real filmsman, and I'll say it again, everybody should go to the Inquirer.com/sports and look at all your breakdowns. I know you'll probably have one up tomorrow or Wednesday, so everybody should go.
Tomorrow morning. Yep,
I figured they would have it. So everybody check out. You're going to break down everything. You're going to see the issues with the blitz. You're going to see what they did wrong. EJ has the whole thing. Appreciate it, man. Appreciate you.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me.
All right, that was EJ Smith on the Comcast Business Hotline. No, I'm serious now. I'm not just saying that because he's on the line.
His father's calling him.
He's a filmsman. If you ever see EJ Smith out, Temple alum, call him a filmsman. I'm telling you, he's a filmsman.
That's good. That's a good thing.
Yeah, he goes through now because that's the power of the internet now. Because obviously you had it in the paper, but now on the website, right, they'll show all right, this was the set. This is what the Packers did. And then if someone wasn't open, you'll see in the film, Jalen rolled to his left. Nobody was there, blah, 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 blah. He breaks all that down. Here's what they did good on the defense. It breaks it down play by play right there. And suddenly it's a go-to thing for me now.
Hey, everybody, thanks for watching our YouTube. If you want to help us out, go ahead and like and subscribe for us.
If you liked what you saw, go right over here to our playlists and pick out whatever you want to watch.